fmtraining.tv. My name is Margaret. I'll be your broadcast engineer for today. I'm here at the wonderful Wim Decorte. Hello, Wim. How you doing?
I'm doing very well.
Good. Glad to hear it. We got people hanging out in our chat. Hello, Rick Kalman. Good to see you. He's hanging out on YouTube. We are continuing a series today with Wim, which is really fantastic, and we are also having a sort of follow-on series with Todd next week. So, FileMaker 2020, well, at some point, I will stop slurring the name of the year. FileMaker 2025 is out, also known as FileMaker 22. With this release, it's a huge release. I'll find the release notes for you all if you happen to be just popping in for the first time in a couple weeks. It's a huge release. It's like, in terms of features, it's twice as big as the last release. A big part of it is that we have some really improved AI features. AI is now a lot more accessible in this version. It does a lot of stuff. And as a result, we're having a lot of series about AI because most people who are like, oh, cool AI. I was just talking to Wim before the stream started about, people are aware that AI is big and they want to use it. They don't really understand what it is per se. They don't necessarily understand how to use it, and they're still trying to figure out use cases. So the more you understand it, the more you can apply it and figure out how to use it in your own FileMaker development. And that is what we are here for, to continue helping out the community and educating it with the help of many, many amazing presenters. So I'll be posting some links. Sliant has some really amazing blogs that I'll be posting around, as well as the Claris white paper. Wim sent me these links this morning, and I'll be posting around to the other chat that's already in Discord already. Feel free to read through those, though not in the middle of the presentation, or else you'll miss something. But with that being said, I'm kind of eager to get started because we got a lot to cover. So, Wim, what are we doing today?
All right. Well, today we will pick up from where we left yesterday, in essence, and the conversation that we had before the show. I think it's kind of relevant. So I want to spend maybe a minute on that because
Mm-hmm.
it's something that we see on our end too, and we touched on that a little bit yesterday, right? With the FOMO aspect of AI, where
Mm-hmm.
people go like, yeah, I hear it everywhere, and it really feels like it's important. A lot of people will begin to realize how disruptive AI is going to be to how we have been doing things for a long, long time. Um, and with that comes opportunities. With that also comes, to some extent, risks, right? Like we don't want to be the ones left behind if our competitors start doing a lot of AI and get good benefit from that. So that's where that fear of missing out comes from. Fear is not a good feeling. So we don't want to stay there. That's what we're doing here, right? We're trying to take the unknown out of what all things AI are. And the last couple of days, the first 3 days, we've spent a lot of time on the foundations of it, right? What's a model? What does that look like? What types are there? How are they tied to the FileMaker features? So basically, what FileMaker features use what type of model? All of those things. Um, and then yesterday we began to spend some time on the Claris local AI model server, because that's what we're going to continue to spend some time on today. If we get to today, certainly then tomorrow, I'll talk about some alternatives to that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because the beauty of our platform is that we're never boxed in. There's a lot of stuff that we can do with the native script steps, but there's also other things we can do with the things that may not be as obvious. A lot of that comes back to something that I've been hammering on in the last couple of days, is that integrating with an AI provider is nothing more than an API integration, right? There's documentation about how to do it, and we have the tools to do it. That's really as simple as it gets. And I get it. If you haven't really done a lot of API integrations, then this may feel like a double whammy, right? Where you go like, I have to learn API integrations before I can get into the AI stuff. The beauty of this, it's really not that hard, right? Like if you've done one API integration, you'll recognize the patterns for every other one that you'll be doing. It's very not repetitive. That's the wrong word, but it's standard is a better word, right? Like they all follow the same standards and patterns and all of these things, and that makes it easy to replicate what you've learned on one and use it for the other one.
Yes, which is nifty. I just did an API integration with Twilio, and I'm immediately recognizing the API aspects now of interacting with AI, despite only having done the one API integration. There's a lot of standardized stuff between it. I think that was a good way to describe it, Wim.
Yep. So we'll continue on talking about what it takes to set up your own AI model server. Yesterday we touched, and the day before even, we touched on some of the reasons why, right? We have to realize that we're going to be sending data. We're going to be sending some proprietary information about how our solution is built, the schema. So for those use cases where you don't want to do that, where some of that data is sensitive to you, you want to keep control over that data. I used the example yesterday where it's not a binary choice, right? Nobody is saying only use local models or and never use OpenAI, Cohere, Anthropic. For those questions where there isn't any sensitive data involved, by all means, right? You can integrate with those, and actually inside your solutions, you can do both at the same time. That was one of the key points that we touched on yesterday, where you can configure multiple AI accounts inside your FileMaker solution, and depending on where you are, what kind of workflow you're dealing with, you go to the local one or you go to the OpenAI one, right? So you have lots of flexibility there in doing that. This is actually, I'll probably show that in the actual FileMaker server. Yesterday, we showed how you get to have a local AI server, right? It's in essence, you pick a machine that has the resources that you want, and we spent a lot of time yesterday on the resources. Happy to revisit that because and actually I'll show you some practical examples of that today. So you pick the machine that has the resources, you use the FileMaker server installer to install it, but you basically limit that to just the AI services tab of that FileMaker server. And what I mean by that is exactly this, right? So to you and to everybody else, really, this looks like a FileMaker server. It isn't, right? Because there's no files hosted. Actually, there is the sample one that I probably would remove if I did this for real. This was actually a plain vanilla, right? So this is what you get when you install FileMaker server on your AI server, right? On the machine that you will want to be using as your AI model server, right? So I haven't changed any of the settings at this point because I wanted to show you what that looks like. The only thing that I have done is I've enabled this toggle, right? And that basically, when you do that, it'll ask you to go download something from GitHub, which is MiniForge. Because remember, under the hood, everything that we see here is just a very nice UI on top of a Python microservice. Right? The AI model server is a Python microservice. Microservice, if you're not familiar with the term, is really it's a tiny web server that exposes some endpoints that you can call. We do a lot with microservices because they allow for very nifty architecture and all of that stuff. But in essence, think web server, but a tiny one, right? It's not as big as IIS or Nginx or Apache. It's tinier than that because it's specialized to do just the things that it needs to do. But in essence, so when you toggle that on, that's exactly what you get, right? All of the difficulty of installing all of that stuff is taken away from you, and you get the endpoints that you would then use in the configure AI account script step inside your FileMaker solution. Well,
which is
we'll come
brilliant.
back. Well, actually, I can spend some time on that. Go ahead, Margaret.
I was just saying, I marvel at the fact that it's the cool part about FileMaker. It takes really complicated stuff and it turns it into a toggle. Always makes me happy to see that, honestly.
Yeah, it's and clearly we've been able to do this since FileMaker 2024, right? That was one of my slides from yesterday, right? So
Hmm.
if you're so inclined, you can certainly install your own Python microservice to do this. You can even use JavaScript if you want, because a microservice is just a microservice. As long as the libraries exist that can do that interaction with those models. And remember, the models are just binary files, big ones, but binary files, right? So we'll actually touch on that a little more today about that size and the numbers that they store. But once you've enabled your AI server, you get to choose what types of functionality that you want to expose, right? If all you need to do is text generation, in essence, chat with the AI model, if you're not going to do text embedding or image embedding, you can toggle that off. Uh, it's right there. Same if you're not going to do fine tuning. And remember, fine tuning is a piece of functionality that only works on Apple hardware, right? So if this was and this is a Mac Mini and that we're looking at here, if this was a Windows box or a Linux box, then fine tuning wouldn't work to begin with. Um, so these are the default settings. You basically leave them on. You toggle them off as you want to use them. The require API key for access. I would highly recommend that you turn it on. This really just if you remember that configure AI accounts, it's basically you give it a name, you pick the provider, and then you say what API key can be used to access that AI model. Um, Even if it's deployed internally and you're somewhat secure in your perimeter and all of that, it's still a good idea to add an API key to your AI model server deployment. For me, that should be just that's a no-brainer, right? So turn it on and do that. Preload models and load previous models. I'll actually jump to models in a second, explain what that is. We have an option to log token usage that can keep track of what kind of tokens you use. So this would be a log server side. I mentioned, I think Tuesday or even way back to Monday, we have two get functions inside FileMaker. One was just to calculate the number of tokens of any string, but there is one that will give you the tokens used on the last interaction you had with a model, right? So, uh, this goes in that same category. Uh, and for those of you who weren't here for the rest of the days leading up to this, um, when you deploy your own AI model server, you don't need to worry about how many tokens you consume because you're not getting charged by the token. But if you use one of the other providers, you will pay by the millions of tokens that you use, right? So either way, even if you deploy this locally, I think you'd still want a mechanism by which you track how many tokens you use. If for nothing else, to know, right? Knowing more is always better than knowing less. Because if
Yes.
at some point you're dissatisfied with the quality, maybe, or maybe you want to give up on uh, on on hosting your own AI model server, this is the kind of information that will let you make wise decisions, right? Because even, and we'll get to Bedrock again, if not today, then tomorrow for certain. Bedrock lets you. Bedrock is the perfect hybrid between using a commercial provider that is in the cloud and still maintaining control over your data, right? Because you put something in your own virtual private cloud, but Bedrock will still charge you by the millions of tokens, right? So
Oh, okay.
yeah. So they would host a model for you. So if you take one of the Anthropic models like Claude Sonnet or Claude Opus, um, when you make calls, there would be nothing that goes to Anthropic. Everything stays safely within your virtual private cloud, but they'd still be charged you by the millions of tokens. I'm sure that that's their licensing agreement with Anthropic or OpenAI. So so long story short, it's really good to know how many tokens you consume in anything that you do. So this will help you get there. And we have some advanced settings here as well. This we talked about RAG a little bit, right? Retrieval augmented generation. That's one of the ways, one of the two ways. Fine tuning would be the other one. We're not going to talk about fine tuning because that's highly specialized. But RAG is a very nice and easy way to add information to what the model would be able to retrieve, right? Anything that is business specific to you, any knowledge that you have that wouldn't be embedded in the generically trained model, RAG or retrieval augmented generation is a way to do that. And there's a script step in FileMaker that you can add data, remove data, and then query data, and that's in the RAG. And that's where it's stored, right? On the server, there's a cache file where your RAG data is. Remember, I mentioned yesterday, when you pick a model, ideally, all of that model needs to be loaded in memory, right? And I'll show you a practical example on my model server. The RAG data, the same rule applies, right? So for the RAG data to be efficient or be efficiently retrieved, that needs to be in memory as well, right? So when we talked yesterday about calculating the amount of memory, largely and specifically the video RAM, if you're on Apple hardware, that's the unified RAM. It's one thing. That's one of the factors that you have to keep in mind as you're doing this. All right. So again, this is a plain vanilla machine. I didn't go out to seek other models. This is what you get when you install the local AI model server. And this does not mean that automatically these models get downloaded and installed on your machine, right? These are just pre-configured models. These are the models that Claris has tested with, the
Hmm.
ones that they have that they can vouch for that they work. Okay? And also remember, the local AI model server can host one of each type of model. So the type is over here in the middle column. So you can have one text embedding model, one image embedding model, and one text generation model loaded, right? That doesn't mean that you can only have one configured. You can have a whole slew of them configured, and I'll show you my other machine in a bit. But only one of the each type can be loaded at the same time. And there's a consequence to that, and we'll get to that as well. When you install the model server as it is, you'll see that all of them are unloaded by default. Right? Claris does not make any decisions for you what model you want to load. It just says here are some models that we suggest that you can start with, that you can work with. Uh, and it says here also the download is acknowledged. That is no for all of these. What it means is that if I want to load a model, right? So if I click download, it will ask me to explicitly acknowledge that it's okay to download, right? That's really meant to prevent accidental downloads of gigabytes worth of data.
Yes, that would be unfortunate considering they're so large.
Yep. I'll give you an example on my other server of one of the models, and the model is 85 gigs worth of data, right? Uh,
Ooh,
so this may feel like, to some extent, like an unnecessary step because you're on your way to downloading the model, and so you have to explicitly acknowledge. But it's there for a good reason, right? So keep that in mind. So as soon as I click yes once, like I never have to do that again, right? So then the download will say acknowledged, and the next time I want to use it, if I unload it, or and next time I want to load it, it'll just go ahead and load it. If I accidentally deleted that model, and I'll show you where to go for that, uh, then uh, it will have to download that again. There's a
what ma
couple of, go ahead.
I was just gonna ask about loaded and unloaded. What makes it like considered loaded? Do you designate it as loaded like in the server, or is it considered loaded when a script calls it the model and then it loads the model?
It's a really good question, Margaret. It's actually a bit of both. At this point, I'm playing the server admin role or the
Mm-hmm.
developer, right? Like where I need to configure this because I want to be using certain models when I get to my FileMaker functionality. Um, so when a model, actually, let me jump to another machine here that I have where I already have some of that. Would I be using this one? Go away. Models. Yeah. So as you can see here, this is actually a Linux box. That's why I named it CUDA, because
Mm.
CUDA is that NVIDIA framework for efficiently using the GPUs. Um, so these are still the default configured models, but except that these two, I've acknowledged the download. You see that the button here changes from download to unload when the
Okay.
model is loaded, right? So if I go, this is text generation, and here's another text generation, right? So remember, I can only have one text generation model loaded at the same time. So if I do unload, then the status goes to unloaded, the button changes to loaded. If I do this, this may take a while, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because we're talking about the 7 billion parameter Google Code Gemma. It's not huge. It's multiple gigabytes though. So
Yeah,
it,
it's still a couple gigs.
yeah. So this gives you a good indication of the time that it takes. So I mentioned in my answer to you while we're waiting on this download that it's a bit of both. This
Mm-hmm.
is one way of how the model will get loaded. If I explicitly go in here and say unload this, load that, right?
Got it.
The other way that this could happen is by virtue of calling the model. If I go in here, and actually I may as well call this out and not leave you too much in suspense. See, I call this bad, right?
Okay, why is it called bad?
It's called bad because if I do this, right? So we're going to focus on these four script steps. in this one, I'm saying I want to use the Google Gemma 3, which is a 12 billion parameter model.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to call the script step that actually calls the model, right? The generate response from model.
Okay.
And I'm using this model name that I just did. Um, when I do this, when this script step on line 14 gets executed, my AI model server will look at this model and say, do I currently have this loaded? If I don't, I have to unload whatever text generation model that I have loaded and go load this one because you're asking for it.
Mm-hmm.
And that'll work assuming that I have acknowledged the downloads, right? So if I haven't, then you'll get an error because it'll say that model is not available. Uh,
Got it.
but assuming that I have previously acknowledged that it's okay to download that, then this will load the model. Now, this one is another text generation model, the CodeGemma 7 billion thing. So by virtue of calling this, if I do this exactly in this sequence, right? Assuming that this Google Gemma 3 model was loaded, this script step on line 17 will unload the Gemma 3 and will load the CodeGemma 7 billion.
Okay, so is that going to make your server scream? That seems like it'd make your server scream.
Your server is going to do its best to help you out, right? Um,
Yes.
but you'll go it'll go through that process that was running in the background where it says, well, it kind of depends. If the model was downloaded, it's not half bad. But remember,
Mm-hmm.
these are billions worth of gigabytes that have to be removed from memory, go grab from the hard drive that other 30 gig model, load it completely into memory, right? So it's even on a really fast machine, we're talking about seconds before that is done, right? And I
Yes.
say seconds, we're not talking about 2 seconds, right? We're talking about multiple seconds. Um, so so keep that in mind. The other downside of that, of course, is what if two users? What if I have a script that went in the other direction, and I have two users trying to call different models, text generation models at the same time? That's not going to be pretty.
Oh, that's interesting. And I assume it would go in order of script, so even if like both of them technically called the same model in different scripts, it would like load the first model, then load the other model, complete that script, and then go do the other script it was called to do?
The no, the if it's the same model, the AI model server can honor concurrent requests at the same
Okay.
time. That's not an issue. But if user one makes a call to model one, but
Mm-hmm.
user two makes a call to model two, and my server is configured to allow for multiple text
Mm-hmm.
generation models, but it can only load one at the same time, then you'll have a conflict there at some point.
Yes, no, I'm realizing my question wasn't very clear. Like, what if it calls like what if like person A calls model one and then model two, and then person B calls model two and model one? Will it try to handle the two model one requests before it takes the two model two
No,
requests, or would it
no,
cycle
it's
through the whole list?
Yep, yeah, yeah. It'll be in sequence, right? So the long and short of it, don't do that, right? Um,
Yes, it is aptly named bad.
exactly, exactly. And we touched on that a little bit in the last couple of days, and we had some questions that were going that direction, right? So what if I really wanted to host or have those two models be available and not have any conflict, right? The real answer to that is have two AI model servers, right? And so that each one can run a different model and be available at different times. To your FileMaker solution, it really doesn't matter, right? Because you can have multiple of these, as we mentioned yesterday, right? So one configure AI account can point to that server, the other one can point to that server, right? Because they're just API calls. There's no logical link between your FileMaker server and your model servers. They're just endpoints. They're just URLs in essence,
Yes, got it. Yep,
right?
making sense so far.
Yes. So let me go back to my this one because I want to call out the red thingies, right? Again, this is plain vanilla. I haven't done anything yet. This is I just installed FileMaker Server to get the local AI model server up and running. Um, I mentioned this is a Mac Mini. It has 16 gigs of RAM, right? Great machine, right? But the warning here will already tell me this is not going to be good, right? Same here. This is a 24 gig model. It just doesn't fit, right? It it doesn't mean that it wouldn't work, right? I would caution you to be extremely careful because I mentioned this yesterday. I've crashed a few machines and trying to do this, right? So operating systems and machines in general, when they run out of memory, they're not happy, right? Like they're like my cat staring at me when I don't have the right blanket on my lap, right? It's as we were talking about.
Yes, they will let you know they're disgruntled, and you won't.
Exactly. So your machine will give you the stink eye when this happens. So pay attention to this, right? So Claris has built in some early warnings before you shoot yourself in the foot that you can see this is probably not going to work, right? So that's one way that you'll get an early indication about what models are going to be a fit or not a fit on your machine. Also remember, most typically you'll run into that with the text generation models, right? Because the embedding models are way smaller, right? So typically they're less than a gig. They're maybe 300-400 MB, something like that. And the text generations like this one, right? It says you got to have 24 gigs of memory just to load the model, and and these numbers are somewhat incomplete, but they're as complete as Claris can make them, right? Because Claris has no cannot anticipate how we're going to use that model, what kind of load that we're going to put on that. But the actual memory space that you'll need to efficiently operate that model is bigger than that 24 gigs that's over there, right? So keep that
Hmm.
in mind. This is the other one, right? This one just says, well, that model has not been acknowledged, so there's really nothing I can do with that. You gotta go to this process of acknowledging the download and doing that. There's some other errors that you can get. This is my Mac Studio. As you can see, I've added a bunch of different models, right? So this goes beyond the pre-configured models that Claris gives us to say we've tested with these. I had this Quen one, 32 a billion parameter one at full precision, and we'll get into precision in a sec here. And it also has MLX. The other ones, you have some MLX ones there too. Pro tip, if you will, right? So I mentioned CUDA in a couple of sentences ago, a couple of minutes ago. CUDA
Hmm.
is NVIDIA's framework for efficiently using the GPUs. MLX is Apple's way of doing that same thing, right? So if you're running Apple hardware and you want to go looking for a model, go look for the MLX version of the model. It's going to perform better than the non-MLX version of the same model. And you can see that when these two Google ones are the pre-configured models of that Claris sort of pre-configures for us. They're
Hmm.
not the MLX versions. Again, Claris doesn't know whether your intention is to install this on Apple hardware or on Windows or on Linux. So this is generically a model that they've said, like, we worked with this. It performs well for the functionality that we give you in the FileMaker file, right? And it'll work. Don't get me wrong, right? Like I can load this on my Mac Studio and it'll work just fine. But these versions of the same models that are MLXed, that's not even a verb, but it's a verb now. The are going to perform better, right? Because they're specifically um, configured to take advantage of the MLX framework that is native to Apple hardware. So keep that in mind.
Uh, quick question about the little exclamation point of discontent. When it's saying it's not acknowledged, is the answer to go re-download it? Is that what it's telling you to go
Yep,
do? Okay.
yep. Let's see if I have one where I haven't done that. Done this one on this one. Well, I can't do this because this machine is not good enough to load any of those. Specifically, the Google one, the Google models. Although they are available on Hugging Face, and we'll jump to Hugging Face in a minute. Um, there is a setting on your model server here, Hugging Face token, and the help explains it really well, right? So although all of the models that you find on Hugging Face are free. Uh, some of them need to be authorized, and that that is specifically true for the Google models, right? You cannot use one of the Google models if you don't have a Hugging Face account, and you can get it for free. There's no subscription or anything like that. This is really just Google wanting to know who you are when you're using their models, right? Like no data flows to them. They just want you to acknowledge that it's their model, and they want to know how many Hugging Face users are using their models, right? So there's nothing nefarious about this, and no data flows to Google. I want to emphasize that. But this is basically when you add your Hugging Face token to your a model server configuration, that will allow you to then load these models. Again, assuming that the machine is strong enough to support that. So you can run into some of that.
We have some questions if you're good to take a brief pause to answer them.
Yeah.
I apologize if you've already answered this, but it seems like this new AI service given to us by Claris is, in its entirety, a manager of models fully. So you don't need anything else, and it handles everything once you set it all up due to downloading and running the model from HF, Hugging Face.
I think that's a fair summary, right? It's the whole point of the Claris AI model server is to take all of that management away from you, right? Like it's and there's again, we'll talk about some other tools. There's other tools that can do the same thing, right? Just this keeps it nice within an interface that you're used to, and of course specifically meant for use with the FileMaker functionality. So yeah, calling it a model manager, I think that's a fair summary.
Uh, Someone asked, isn't it better to use a Python backend? Question mark.
It is a Python backend. Actually, let me show you, because that may drive home the point. What we're looking at here is Finder, because actually two of those three servers that I showed you are running on Mac. This is from my Mac Studio. If you're somewhat familiar with installing FileMaker Server on Mac, you'll know that in the library folder, right off your hard drive, there's a FileMaker Server folder, right? And remember, the installer to get the AI model server uses the FileMaker server installer for now. Right? I'm sure that that'll change in the future, but for now, this is the installer that you use. So this FileMaker server folder is kind of meaningless at this point, not entirely, because there's some stuff in there that we can jump to, but this is a new folder that gets installed, FileMaker LLM, right? FileMaker large language model. Inside that, and we'll come to this in a sec, is this open source LLM. And that's really your server that you have in there. And you can see here by the extension, it's compiled Python code. Like you can't open this and see actual Python code. It's compiled, but that's exactly what it is, right? It's a Python backend. So the UI interface, the thing that the admin console in essence is just a wrapper around all that Python stuff. But it is a Python backend, absolutely.
There you go. Do you need to change the amount of RAM your FileMaker server should use for the AI models?
Yes, right. Let me jump on where actually I'll jump to my Mac Studio and show you that. It's one of the things that I do by default if I install again, because you're installing a full FileMaker server in essence to get to the local AI model server. You're not going to use the FileMaker server part. So like I said, like there's no files hosted, there's nothing I need to do. But we need to be aware of and I'll make this as big as I can make it. This thing, this line over here, right? By default, FileMaker Server uses a database cache, and the database cache is a slice of the memory that it is not going to share with anything else. It monopolizes it. It sits on it. Since we're not using FileMaker Server for what FileMaker Server is, you would want to scale that down from its default, where the default is half a gig, so it's not massive, right? But on a machine where you're somewhat constrained in memory, you'd want to be doing this, right? So you would change this to the default. Well, sorry, not because the default is 512, but to the minimum allowed, which is 64 megabytes. And so that answers the question. Um, one of the other things that I do typically on one of these machines in the configuration parts, right? So turn this off so that you won't accidentally be hosting any files. Set the block new users to on. Even if you then accidentally host a file, nobody's going to connect to it, right? So you're not using this as a FileMaker server. So don't do anything that you need to do. There's one exception, and it's this toggle, right? The automatically start database server. The database server is actually needed for some of that generating keys, and we'll talk about keys in a sec, but that's actually needed. So you can't turn this off or your AI model server will not function.
David, you need to pay a license for using the AI service only. So I guess he's saying if you only have, does it count against your licenses if you have a regular FileMaker server and then multiple AI servers?
The Ronnie Rios, the PM, the AI PM at Claris, answered that question in the community live webinar, where he says we're not going to enforce anything about that, right? Because and it's a very fair question, right? Because you're installing a full FileMaker server, so it certainly feels like you're using up one of your licenses. Don't worry about it, right? I've said this in my executive summary and in that webinar that I've done together with Ronnie. We need to think about this AI model server as almost like a secondary WebDirect server, right? When you install a secondary WebDirect server, you're not consuming a license either, right? So think of this more as utility servers, satellites, if you will, around your main FileMaker server. It's your main FileMaker server that consumes a license, not the satellites.
There you go. Oh, the follow-up to the Python backend question. If you use multiple models simultaneously, couldn't you manage this via a separate Python backend?
Um, the shorter answer is yes. The longer answer is you probably wouldn't want to do that on the same machine again, except because if you're going to run two separate AI model servers on the same machine and with two text generation models, each one of a decent size.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
I'm not saying that it's not possible, right? Like if you have the hardware for that, absolutely have at it. Fundamentally, it's a really good question, right? When we talked about the FileMaker script steps being fancy wrappers around the insert from URL, and this Claris AI model server being OpenAI compatible, if we marry those two thoughts, you can pick anything that can manage models and expose them in an OpenAI compatible fashion, right? It doesn't need to be the Claris AI model server. It's probably the easiest way to do that. But if you really want to do something else, do I have it on this box? I think I do. I actually, oh, I don't have it on this box. I have it on another box, right? So Olama comes to mind, LM Studio comes to mind, Jane comes to mind. So these are all tools that in essence do the same thing as the Claris AI model server that can basically host a model and let you interact with that in an OpenAI compatible fashion. So you have a lot of freedom there. That's really what I meant in the beginning of the presentation, where I said you're never boxed in, right? Like if you evaluate what Claris gives us, if you run into any roadblocks for your particular deployment, then have at it, right? Like there's nothing stopping you.
There we go. Oh, a brief side note from Jacob. Jacob would like me to remind the audience that RCC officially endorses turning off automatically opening databases as a general rule. So,
Absolutely, I'm with Jacob here. As a best practice, it should be off.
so just in case you looking at toggles, go like, ooh, turn those on. Leave a couple of them off.
Yep. Unfortunately, it's actually on by default, right? So you'd have to explicitly go and turn it off. But I'm with Jacob. I highly recommend that you do.
There you go. All right. Where were
Shall
we?
we continue?
Yes.
Um, we got about 19 minutes, so we should be fine. Hugging Face, right? So I mentioned the all of these models, the pre-configured ones, when you acknowledge the download, behind the scenes, really what happens is that the Claris server will reach out to Hugging Face and download that model, right? Because all the models come from Hugging Face, right? So this is your go-to. I'm not saying that you couldn't find a model anywhere else, but there's really no point in looking. Well, I guess you could train your own model from scratch and host it, which is totally fine. There's a couple of things to consider, right? Let's see, do I have, right? I mentioned this, right? So the Gemma 3 27 billion instruction trained, that's what IT means. 8 bits is quantization. May as well talk about quantization now. This is not from Google, it comes from MLX community, right? This is what I said, this is MLX community took the Google Gemma model and MLXed it. Actually, if you're so inclined, can I find this quickly without distracting too much? Yes. There's a great README that comes when you install the Claris AI model server, and it actually describes how you can MLX a model, right? So there's instructions in there. I'm not going to spend any time on them, but it's a great README because it talks a lot about that Python backend and what it can do, cannot do, how it works, that kind of thing. So if you're interested in the technical details, it's a great read. And it explains MLX and it explains how you can do two things. How you can turn a model into an MLX version of the model, specifically for Apple hardware. It also explains how you can quantize a model. And I think I need to explain that before we move on. So let me find that. And we're talking about this, right? Um, in the last 4 days, we talked a lot about text generation models being big and all of that good stuff. The quantization, let me backtrack. Way back on Monday, we said a model is the mental analogy that we made at the time was a spreadsheet, right? It's a spreadsheet with rows and columns. Every cell has a number in it, like lots of numbers, right?
Mm-hmm.
So quantization speaks to those numbers, right? Because every number in a model by default is stored as 16 bits, 2 bytes. That's what is called full precision. It doesn't go higher than that. Well, I'm abstracting, but assume that it doesn't go higher than that, right? So that means that every number in those billions of numbers, because each parameter in a model is a number, right? Every number consumes 2 bytes. That's sort of like how you can calculate the size of a model by looking at the number of billions of parameters. It's straight math, right? You got so many billion numbers times 2 bytes will give you so many gigabytes of outcome. Quantization is something that was introduced to reduce the size of the model, right? You still have the same number of numbers, right? So you don't reduce, say, from a 27 billion parameter to a 7 billion parameter model, because that's another obvious way to keep your model slower. But again, those billions of parameters is how smart the model is, right? So you want to keep to a higher number of parameters, but maybe you don't want the numbers to be stored as full precision, right? Maybe cut it in half and go from 16 bits to 8 bits so that you only consume 1 byte for every number instead of 2 bytes. So roughly, you cut the size of the model down in half by doing that. And you can go down, like you can go to 4 bits or 2 bits, right? The only thing to remember is that when you cut the precision of the numbers, you lose accuracy. So it's a trade-off. You're trading in some accuracy for reducing the model in size, right? If you want to use a high billion parameter model and you have the resources, don't look at quantization, right? If the resources are there for you, just use it at full precision. You'll get the best accuracy. If, however, memory is a constraint, you still can go for a bigger model, but then go for a quantized model of a version of that model, right? The Claris engineers don't suggest going lower than 8 bits, right? So either pick 16-bit, which is full precision, or take 8-bit. Don't go below. Again, not a dogmatic rule. You can certainly experiment with these things and see whether for your use cases you still get enough accuracy out of a 6-bit model or a 4-bit model, right? But if you need a simple rule, either use full precision or quantize, find a model that is 8-bit. And again, that README, if you're so inclined, will explain you how you can quantize any model to the precision that you want. But more often than not, you can save yourself the trouble and find the models, right? Like in this case, this is the 27 billion parameter model, right? So you can expect this model to be about 27 gigabytes in size, but it's quantized to about half of that. It's an 8-bit model, right? Now, FileMaker server, that AI model server, why am I clicking all over the place? Has a very nifty feature that is, yes, thank you very much. I need my Qt. It's only available on Linux and Windows boxes because it's a feature that uses Qt. Qt doesn't exist on Mac. On Apple hardware, they use MLX. But there is a feature that will only show up when your AI model server is a Windows or Linux box, and it's this feature, right? So if you don't see this and you're running on Apple hardware, that's the reason, right? The feature gets hidden if it's not available on your model. And what this does, it allows you to you still have to have the memories. Well, it's not entirely true. It allows you to use a full precision model, but when it gets loaded, it gets quantized on the fly down to 8 bits,
Okay.
so that
So
it uses fewer resources. So
what's
it really saves you from having to go find an 8-bit model of a version of the model that you want.
okay, I thought to say, well, what's the point of having that then? Would you just want to like load the 8-bit model, but it stops you from having to go load the 8-bit model yourself? You can just have the 16-bit and then quantize
Yep,
it? Okay.
yep, yep. It's a small feature, but it can be important, right? Because it's very easy now on these machines to go test. Like, what's the difference in accuracy if I quantize or not quantize?
Got it. Okay.
Right? So I wanted to call that one out. So Hugging Face, back to here, right? If you go to the base models endpoint on Hugging Face, uh, it's overwhelming, right? Like, how do you pick between those 2 million models? Which ones do you want, um, right? Um, you have the parameters sliding scale here that you want. So maybe 500 billion parameters. Maybe that's not what you're looking for, right?
You can download that?
You could. Right. So let's be realistic a little bit and say I want to go to maybe 128 billion, right? So that would still require you to have a lot of memory in that machine, right? And maybe
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to go below, say, 12 gigs of model. So now from the 2 million, we're down to 56,000, that kind of stuff. So that's one way that you can like help look for things. But the other one, and again, you could use that same mechanism for the embedding models. We have a little bit of time that I want to show you the actual downloaded models. But the other way that you need to look at these is you pick the task that the model that you want to use the model for, right? In our case, the bigger models are the text generation models, so those are the ones that we want. So you pick that, and you pick this. That's a must. The transformers library. Transformers is crucial because that Python code that makes up the Claris AI model server uses the transformers library to interact with the models. If the model doesn't support that, then the Claris AI model server just won't be able to use the model.
Oh, okay. Simple answer. Got it.
So we're down from 2 million models to about 17,000 models that you could potentially use. And to show you a specific example of what that looks like if you try to download a model, because I was trying to use this one. It's a 32 billion model. It's one of the bigger ones. It's MLX, so it's going to run efficiently on my Apple hardware. It's full precision because I want full accuracy, but it just won't load. And that's because this Quen model is not a Transformers model. Right? So keep that in mind as you set out to search for your models here. So pick the task, text generation, pick the library transformers, and then you can go to town looking in the 17,000 models that you want to use. I needed to show you this, right? Again, we're looking at the Finder from my Mac Studio where my local AI model server is installed on. and I've asked Finder to show me hidden files, right? So if you've never done that, that's Shift Command dot or period. That'll show this one. And you see this hidden file here, cache. If I ask Finder to calculate sizes, because it doesn't like to do that, I think it's an expensive operation. See here my cache folder?
It's a very large cache folder.
Yes, because that's where it downloads all the models, right? So let's see, as an example, right? So this sentence transformers is one of the embedding models, right? So you can see how tiny it is, right? It's less than 200 megabytes. The bigger model is 600 megabytes. I'm not going to worry about that, right? Um, the other ones, like that Quen model that I wanted to use, which is 32 billion parameters, that's 65 gigs worth of data. Keep in mind that when you go into your FileMaker server, actually, let me show you that because I'm not going to use that model anymore. So if I say this model here, that Quen model, it's not loading anyway. So right, remove it. You may be forgiven to think that it actually deletes it. It does not, right? It just removes it from the
Oh,
admin console.
that's an important detail.
Yep. Yep. It got me out. So on that Mac Mini where I was first and on my laptop, because my laptop has 36 gig of RAM. I was
Mm-hmm.
experimenting with that, and disk space on the laptop is kind of premium. Um,
Yes.
right. So I go like, but I deleted all these big ones. Why am I still out of disk space? It's that, right? And remember, it's in a hidden folder to begin with, right? So it's not something that you'll stumble across to say, ah, there it is, right? So removing a model from the admin console for your Claris AI model server does not delete it. You have to manually delete it.
Okay, good to know.
We got about 5 minutes left. Any burning questions out there?
Uh, this one has popped up. If you have a monster setup, i.e. an M3 Ultra with 512 gigs, could you run multiple FMI AI servers in Docker/containers?
Oh, theoretically, yes, absolutely. You got to be a little careful with Docker because Docker fairly recently started supporting GPUs, right? And before that, it didn't. So you got to be a little careful with containerization to make sure that it actually supports GPUs. Otherwise, it can be a little awkward. Um, can it be done? Absolutely, right? At the end of the day, it exposes itself as an HTTPS web server, right? So there's nothing fancy about ports. You can map those. You can make all of that work without much of a problem. Again, the biggest issue potentially be resource contention, right? Because in that setup, you would have plenty of memory, but are the number of GPUs sufficient for all the load that you want to give it? But certainly, it feels like it should work.
Got it. Uh, would a 27 billion but quantized model be more accurate than like a, I don't know, 12 billion parameter non-quantized model?
It's a good question. It depends on the questions that you ask of it. Right? It's actually an interesting conundrum, right? Because you have almost double the size in parameters, but then half the size, if you will, from going from full precision to 8 bits.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so do these things even themselves out? I don't have a definitive answer to that. It's something that I probably wouldn't be comfortable answering unless I test with my specific use cases. I want to call something out here called GGUF because you're bound to come across it, and maybe you go like, "Ha, that's interesting. Maybe I can get away with that." GGUF models are the same models as we otherwise would use, but they're specifically. I hesitate to call to use the term tune because tuning, the term tuning that we've used is more about the knowledge than how they're configured. But these models are configured to run on non-GPU machines. They're configured to run on regular CPUs.
What is the current trend regarding text generation models? Do they improve efficiency and reduce size, or do they do the opposite?
It's actually both. the trend is that smaller models become more accurate. Because even the models that OpenAI and Cohere and Anthropic use on their side, which are huge models, we're talking about 100 billion parameters plus, right? Their previous versions were something like 150 billion parameters. I'm talking about something like, I'm going to screw this up, but Claude Sonnet or Claude Opus or something like that was in that range. Their newer models, and they don't always publish their numbers, but their newer version of that, which is more accurate and faster, actually has fewer billions of parameters.
Cool, which is good. Why does the Quen model show up in the filtered list on Hugging Face if it doesn't support the Transformers library?
This one, some of these, you'll have to learn what some of these suffixes and like terms intermittently here work. I actually don't know what A3B is, right? So I just download another model before I learned about the fact that it had to be transformer compatible. So would this one work? I would assume that it does because it's incompatible, but it may be a tuned model for a specific task that I don't want. So sometimes these suffixes or these parts of the file name mean a specialized tuning, and maybe that's not what I'm after.
Got it. There you go. With that, I don't see any other questions at the moment, but something happened earlier this stream that I want to circle back to in my chats. Someone said, I was really looking forward to AI tools and scripting, but I don't think that's part of this version, maybe in a future update. And since Rick Kalman is so kindly watching us, I'll read what he said back out, which is, he says, a scripting and calculations coworker is on the FM public roadmap. It's coming. AI assistant to write calculations and scripts using natural language. So for those of you who are looking more for AIs like a buddy in your development, that is currently in progress. So
And you can go watch on YouTube on the Claris channel. You can go watch the Engage keynotes where some of this is shown, right? So it's not just on the roadmap; it's actually being worked on as far as we saw at Engage.
yes, so it is coming. They haven't like forgotten about it, or they're not even. Yeah, it's very much coming. So yes, I'll find the Engage links. People who haven't seen the keynote, I don't know when it went public, but I'll share it around. Um,
A little
I
while
haven't.
ago.
Yeah, I'd have to go check. I don't see any other questions, so I think I'm good to let you go on time for once.
All right.
Thank you, Wim. Thank you, everyone, for coming. It's greatly appreciated. I hope you all have a lovely day, and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow to wrap up Wim's awesome week with us. Bye bye.